The husband will be the last to know. I used to think that the more love you show, the more attention you give, the more you satisfy all her desires, the more the woman in your life realizes how lucky she is to have you. I don't think that anymore. I now believe that all these things just make her take you for granted. They make her think that there is nothing she can't do, and you won't notice it or make excuses for her. Sabrina and I met freshman year of college. We started dating, and by the end of freshman year, we were in an intermittent relationship. We both seemed to really like each other, and we enjoyed the lovemaking we were doing, but neither of us were at the point where we wanted to get into a permanent relationship. Halfway through senior year, we met again, and this time we stayed together. 6 months after graduation, we got married. Soon after, my parents celebrated their 25th wedding anniversary, and during the party, I caught my dad alone and asked him how he and my mom had managed to stay happy with each other for so long. I pointed to a few couples we knew who seemed like they couldn't go a week without fighting about something. How do you and Mom manage not to be like everyone else? The secret, son, is to tell them every day that you love them, to show them every day that you love them. Never let yourself get to the point where you take for granted that they know it. Always show it. Every day of your marriage, show it. It's that simple. I took his advice to heart, and for the next 7 years, not a day went by that I didn't tell Sabrina I loved her. I never forgot a birthday, anniversary, or any other special occasion, and I even had a list of nonsense anniversaries that I used to justify giving cards, flowers, and other special gifts. I sent Sabrina flowers on the anniversary of the first time she made meatloaf and the first time she used our new washer and dryer. I gave her a card on the anniversary of her first promotion at work. No event was too big or too small that I couldn't write it down and use it. She received flowers and candy on the anniversary of the first time we made love. I sent flowers to her office for no reason, just so that in the middle of the workday, she would get a card saying, "I love you." I did everything I could think of to show her how much she meant to me. I followed my dad's advice, but my dad used his relationship with my mom as an example. He didn't take into account the fact that different women look at the same thing differently. Whereas my mom looked at it as a sign of my father's constant love for her, Sabrina saw it as a sign of my insecurity and that I was doing it to beg for her attention. Somehow, my desire to show her my love devalued me in her eyes. I, of course, didn't know this and moved on with my life knowing that I had a happy and loving marriage. Sabrina and I were thriving in our chosen fields. We were both climbing the corporate ladder, and as we progressed, work required more time, more energy, quite a few late nights and occasional business trips. There were nights when we didn't even see each other. I was working late and Sabrina was asleep when I got home, or vice versa. I accepted it as the price we paid for success, and I assumed Sabrina did too. When we were together, I did my best to make up for the time we spent apart. The love was amazing. There were weekends when we didn't even get dressed. Sabrina would smile and tell me she was mine forever, and I certainly believed it. I found out about it at her company's Christmas party. It was held at a hotel downtown. Her company had rented a ballroom and several rooms to use as guest rooms. The party was being held on Wednesday night, and I told Sabrina that I would meet her there. The party started at 7. But I had a client from out of town that I had to put on an 8 o'clock flight, so I told Sabrina not to expect me until 8:30 or so. At the last minute, the client decided to stay another day and sightsee, so I arrived at the party at 7:30. I entered the ballroom just in time to see Sabrina with a man I didn't recognize, but then I didn't know most of the people she worked with since I'd only seen them at picnics and Christmas parties. What struck me as odd was that Sabrina had her arm around his waist. I headed towards the hallway they had entered, and upon entering it, I found that it was some sort of lobby with 3 rooms branching off from it. I wondered which room they had entered, so I tried the one nearest to me and found it empty, as was the room next to it. I was just about to close the door and go to the 3rd room when I heard a giggle. It seemed to be coming from the room. even though it looked empty. So I went back inside to take a better look around. I heard another giggle and realized it was coming from a vent in the ceiling. That's when it hit me that I could hear what was going on in the next room. I headed for the door to go to the next room when I heard Sabrina say, "Careful, you don't want to rip your dress, do you?" "Well, how the hell am I supposed to get to you?" "Here, let me show you." Damn it, Rena. I never get tired of looking at these beauties. There was the sound of a zipper being zipped up, and then Sabrina said, "Now there's something I'll never get tired of. Are you sure we don't have time to run into one of the rooms for some quick love? I need you." "Come on, love. You just made love at lunch, and you did it for 3 hours on a Monday night. You can wait till tomorrow." "No, I can't." "Well, you're gonna have to. Bob said he'd be here around 8:30, and I have to be here when he comes in. If he gets here early and I walk in with a just-made love look on my face, he might get suspicious and start checking up on me, and we don't want that." "Come on, Rena. If he's as weak as you say he is, we can make love in front of him and it won't matter." "I know, love. I could just tell him to go home and we'll talk about it when I get there. And then I could convince him that we were just joking around and trying to play a joke on him and he'd believe me. But just because I know I can, doesn't mean I want to open that particular can of worms. Are you sure we can't make a quick run upstairs?" "I don't want to take any chances, love, but I can take the edge off for you." There was a pause, and then the man groaned. "Mark will be very angry when I tell him you were with me, and he'll have to wait until tomorrow." "Maybe he won't." "I thought you said we couldn't tonight." "I said we couldn't go up to the guest suite. I didn't say anything about not being able to." "How can you do that? Mark probably won't be here until after your husband." "God, Rena, you're a depraved woman." "I know, lover. That's why you like me." "Come on, lover, we have to get back to the party." It's amazing how quickly love can die. I went from infinite love and affection to absolute hatred in a matter of seconds. The whole time I was fighting with myself. Should I kick down the door and then kick ass, or sit back and use what I just learned to make plans? Should I strike while it's hot, or wait and find out names, dates, and places? If I pounce on them now, it would be a he said, she said situation in divorce court. I could say I overheard, and she could flatly deny it. I needed more information. Besides, if I kicked down the door, I might never find out who Mark was, or even if there were any other men besides Mark and the guy in the next room with Sabrina. No, I'd still get my ass kicked eventually, but it wouldn't be that night. I hurriedly walked out of the building and got in my car before it was time for me to tell Sabrina to wait for me. When I entered the ballroom, I saw Sabrina sitting at a table with 2 couples and 1 man. Sabrina's height was 173 centimeters, and the guy she was sitting next to was taller by about 10 centimeters, so unless he had very short legs, I assumed he was about 183 centimeters tall. His black, wavy hair and pencil-thin mustache, as drawn with a pencil, allowed me to determine that he was a real smarmy individual before I even approached the table. Sabrina saw my approach, stood up, and backed away from the table. She opened her arms to embrace me and moved to kiss me with her cum-soaked mouth. But at the last second, I turned my head and accepted the kiss on my cheek. I noticed the surprise on her face. "I think I'm sick with something, Sunshine. I don't want to pass it on to you." She agreed and then introduced me to the people at the table. His name was Ron, and when he stood up to shake my hand, I could see that I was close to my guess. My height is 183 centimeters, and we were, roughly, at each other's eye level. This was only important because I wanted to know his reach when I went after him. We sat down and I started chatting with my wife's co-workers. I sensed that the 2 couples were a little restless, like they were expecting something to happen. I danced 2 numbers with Sabrina, and during the second, she whispered in my ear, "That thing that made you sick won't stop you from jumping on my bones tonight, will it?" Yeah, I bet it would. I thought so. I wanted to say, "No, Rena, I don't think so," but I didn't. I'd never called her Rena like Ron had, and I wasn't ready to do anything to alarm her yet. So I said, "Hey, we'll just have to wait and see how things go and how I feel when we get home." Sabrina didn't know it yet, but she would never make love to me again. When the music stopped and we went back to the table, there was another man sitting there talking to Ron, and Sabrina introduced me to Mark. He was about 5'83" tall and maybe 82 pounds. He had soft hands and a weak chin, and I memorized that information. After about 10 minutes, Mark got up to visit with people at another table, and I followed him with the edge of my eye. I wasn't surprised to see him enter the hallway that led to the room where Sabrina was with Ron. Apparently, Ron had prepped him while Sabrina and I were on the dance floor. After a couple minutes, Sabrina got up, kissed me on the cheek, and told me she was going to the bathroom. Ron let her move a couple of feet away from the table and then asked me what I thought about the Broncos' Super Bowl chances. Apparently, Sabrina had told him that I was an avid soccer fan, and he would use that to keep me occupied while Sabrina slipped away to Mark. While talking to Ron about soccer, I watched with the corner of my eye for the door through which Mark exited, and less than a minute later, Sabrina walked through it. It was almost 15 minutes before Sabrina returned to the table, and I continued to talk to Ron and pretend like I hadn't noticed how long she'd been gone. I wondered if Ron had realized what had happened. Sabrina had made love to Mark, and he had gotten a little more than Ron. I don't know if anyone else at the table noticed it, but after 10 years of marriage, I could recognize the signs. I don't think Sabrina even realized I knew her that well. After she returned to the table, I danced with her again, and she pressed herself against me. "Please don't let me down tonight. If this party wasn't so damn important, I would right now get you out of here." When we got back to the table, Mark asked Sabrina to dance, and as they stepped onto the floor, I saw a smirk on the face of one of the women at the table as she looked in my direction. I remembered the old cliché, "The husband is the last to know." Mark handed her back, then Ron led her out, and I saw the two women at the table smile understandingly at each other. I filed it away in my mind. If it was common knowledge among the people she worked with, it wouldn't be hard to figure out what I needed. Sabrina danced with a few of the people she reported to, and then sat at her boss's table for 15 minutes talking to him. When she returned to our table, she whispered, "Okay, lover, I was seen, and I danced with the people I was supposed to dance with. Let's go home, lover. Be ready for me. I really need this." We were in different cars, and I gave her a good head start. I wanted her to be home, undressed and on the bed when I arrived. That way she could experience the full effect of what I had planned. I drove slowly to make sure she had time to get the way I wanted her to be. When I got home, I rushed upstairs and through the master bedroom to the bathroom, where I simulated the eruption of my bowels. I stayed on the toilet, making the appropriate noises for several minutes, and then went to the sink, flushed the water, and wiped my forehead with a wet rag. Wiping my face with the towel, I went into the bedroom and saw Sabrina lying naked on the bed. "I'm sorry, baby. I don't know what it is, but I'm not going to give it to you. I'm going to sleep in the spare bedroom tonight, and I'll call the doctor in the morning." I could see she was pissed off as I left the room. In the morning, I got up before Sabrina and was sitting at the kitchen table sipping coffee, trying to look sick when she walked into the kitchen. "Feeling better?" she asked. "Not really, no. I hadn't slept much." I looked at the clock. "The doctor's office doesn't open until 8:30. I'd better call work and let them know I won't be in today." I reached for the phone while she poured herself a cup of coffee and then went to get ready for work. "Don't forget I'll be late tonight," she said. "We're still working on that damned budget proposal, which should be ready by next Tuesday." "Yeah, you betcha," I thought, hanging up the phone without ever making the call. After Sabrina left for work, I got dressed, went to my office and tidied up the work I couldn't leave undone, then told the receptionist that I had a doctor's appointment and wouldn't be in for the rest of the day. I left the office and headed to the public library. I dug through the reference books and soon found the addresses and phone numbers for Ronald Bragg and Mark Travail. Then, using the library's computers, I found information on the company Sabrina worked for. I found the names, addresses, and phone numbers of all the officers of the company and all the board members. I checked the biographies of the top officials and the chairman of the board to get an idea of how they might react to the scandal, and I was pleased with what I found. If I was right, even the slightest hint of scandal would cause Sabrina and her two cronies to trash everything. That night, I parked near where Sabrina worked, and when she got out at 5:10, I followed her as she drove across town. She pulled into the motel parking lot, got out of the car, and walked up to room 131. She knocked, the door opened, Mark stepped aside and let her in. 20 minutes later, Ron pulled up, got out of the car, and walked to room 131. I could only assume he was also there to attend the budget meeting. I wondered if Sabrina's company appreciated the fact that their employees were working on the budget on their own time and at their own expense. I could be wrong. Some of them may have turned in an expense report at the meeting. Yes, that's right. I wrote down the make, model, and license plate number of Ron's car and drove home. On the way, I pondered what else I had learned about Ron and Mark. Both were married, but I had no way of knowing if they were happily married or not. All I could focus on was that neither of them were at the corporate party. I needed to find out more about them and maybe get them involved in my plot to rip it up Sabrina, Ron, and Mark's ass. I also thought about a few things I hadn't paid attention to before. For example, Sabrina always worked late on Mondays and Thursdays. I never doubted her when she told me that Mondays dragged on because they had to deal with all the problems from the weekend. On Thursday, she worked late, because on that day they had to finish all the reports that needed to be turned in on Friday. Why did I trust her? I was stupid with love when it came to her. I only now realized how stupid. I was lying in bed reading when I heard her come home. I turned off the light, put the book down, and pretended to be asleep. She opened the door, peeked in, then closed the door and went into her bedroom, and a few minutes later I heard the shower running. That night, sleep came hard to me. I lay staring at the ceiling, trying to think of a way I could destroy the three of them at once and ruin them. It had to be all three of them at once, because I didn't want any of them to see that something had happened to the others and take steps to protect themselves. After it was done, I would let them know who did it, and knowing that, they would know why. And that's when it hit me. I sat down, turned on the light, and picked up the book I was reading. It was a murder mystery about a man who had been framed. He'd been convicted on planted evidence, and a lawyer and a private investigator were frantically trying to prove his innocence before he was executed. That would be enough, I thought, putting the book aside and turning off the light. Now that I knew what I was going to do, I fell asleep and slept like a baby. Friday morning, I told Sabrina that the doctor found I had the intestinal flu and that with medication it should go away in a couple days. I'm still a little weak, but he says I should be strong enough to go to work on Monday. He doesn't want me to do anything but rest this weekend. Sabrina touched my cheek. Rest and gain strength, love. You're going to need it. I've been deprived and will need to make up for it. And then she left for work. After getting dressed, I left the house to do some more research. By the end of the day, I learned that Ron's wife works as a legal secretary and that she wasn't at the party because she was out of town visiting her sick mother. Mark's wife sells real estate and she missed the party because she was trying to close a deal on a $2 million property. Both marriages seemed stable, but I guessed that was because neither woman knew what their husbands were doing. I would fix that, and very soon. After spending a relaxing weekend at home, I told Sabrina that I felt ready to go to work on Monday. I'm still a little weak, but I should be fine as long as I don't overwork myself. Monday night, I went to pick Sabrina up again at the same motel, but it was room 146, and Ron met her at the door and let her inside. 5 minutes later, Mark pulled up and entered the room. I wrote down Mark's car information and drove home. Since I was still asleep in the spare bedroom, I pretended to be asleep when Sabrina came home. I needed to find a new excuse to stay away from her. I couldn't use the flu as an excuse forever, and I needed at least another week to make a plan. I decided to keep it simple. We should use one of Sabrina's tricks against herself. Whenever we argued about something or fought about something, Sabrina would always shut me down until she decided to make up with me. As much as she loved love, it never bothered her to disconnect me for a whole 6 months. But of course now I knew why it never bothered her. She only turned me off, not her lovers. When I got home from work on Tuesday, Sabrina was already waiting for me. "How are you feeling, baby?" "Pretty good." "Want to have a little fun in the bedroom?" "After dinner, I need a little more energy." I thought about it all day, about how I could make Sabrina angry enough to cut me off from love. It wasn't until just before I left work that I had an idea. I was walking to the elevator, and one of the female employees in the records department was walking in front of me. She was wearing pants. I admired her ass and suddenly smiled. I knew what I was going to do. We finished dinner, I helped clear the table, then Sabrina did the dishes, and I dried them and put them away. "Ready to make up for lost time, love? Lead the way." She stripped and shed her clothes as we headed for the bedroom, and I wondered how she could be so hot for me to love her when she clearly didn't care about me. She thought I was a wuss and told her boyfriend so. She treated me with contempt, so why was she trying so hard to get me to make love to her? Well, she wouldn't insist after I was done with her this time. She was naked when we got to the bedroom and immediately laid down on the bed. I was very rough with her in bed. And when it was over, Sabrina jumped off the bed. "You asshole!" she yelled after me as she ran out of the room. Sabrina didn't speak to me for the rest of the week, and didn't that break my heart? My plan was not without some risk to me. If I was caught doing what I was supposed to do, I would be destroyed. The fact that I was willing to take the risk showed how much I wanted revenge. It was expensive, but if it brought what I wanted, it would be the best money I'd ever spent. Phone calls to friends who had friends who knew people helped put me in touch with the right person, and a midnight meeting in a parking lot brought me what I was supposed to get. By the following Sunday, I was ready, and when Sabrina went to work on Monday morning, the decision was made. That evening, I followed Sabrina to the motel again, and when she and her 2 lovers were in room 136, I got out of the car and went to Ron's car. The car was unlocked, and I opened the trunk and put a half-pound of marijuana behind the spare tire. Mark's car was locked, so I had to use a Slim Jimmy I bought from a Snap-on tool dealer to break into the car. I opened the trunk and put a pound of weed in there, and then locked the car, scattering an ounce of weed on the rear bumper to give the police sufficient reason to search it. I drove half a block away, called the police from a payphone, and told them there was a drug buy going on in motel room 136, and then gave the license plate numbers of Sabrina, Ron, and Mark's car. They asked my name, and I quickly said, "No way, man, I'm not going to get set up by a bunch of Colombians," and hung up. I got to another payphone, called all 3 local TV stations, and gave them the same information I gave the cops. There had just been an election, and the new mayor in his campaign had promised a war on drugs, and I knew the cops would respond quickly. The TV stations knew the same thing, and they'd be there to do a story. I drove another block to the 3rd payphone and called Ron and Mark's wives and told them their husbands were in room 136 at the Seabreeze Motel with a woman, then drove back and parked off the road where I could watch, and so no one would ask about me. It only took the police 10 minutes to arrive, but it took another half hour to get organized. A couple of patrol cars showed up first, then a SWAT van, followed by 2 unmarked cars full of plainclothes detectives. By the time the cops were ready, the news reporters were already in place, and the TV vans had already arrived and were set up. I watched as 2 SWAT cops kicked down the motel room door with a battering ram and let 4 other SWAT cops go inside with their guns at the ready. God, I wish I could have been a fly on the wall and seen Sabrina's face when the door collapsed. 3 minutes later, Sabrina, Mark, and Ron were led out of the room in handcuffs. Mark and Ron were in their underwear, but Sabrina was naked, under a blanket thrown over her shoulders. I pressed the preset button on my cell phone and called the president of Sabrina's company. When he answered, I said, "Did you know that 3 of your mid-level executives are running the drug trade out of your corporate office?" I told him who they were and what was going on at Seabreeze even as we talked. After making the same call to all 5 board members, I then drove home. When the police searched Ron and Mark's cars, they found planted weed and an ounce of cocaine in Sabrina's purse. Under the front seat of her car, they would find another 4 ounces. Not knowing what Ron and Mark's wives looked like, I don't know if they were in the gathered crowd or not, but I really hoped they were there. This story was featured on the 10 o'clock news on Channels 2 and 7. I laughed when the anchor on Channel 7 said, "Today, Mayor Jones began to fulfill his campaign promise. Police took down a major drug ring operating out of a city motel. No news yet on how much was seized." Footage of the 3 arrested drug lords was shown, and we were urged to stay tuned for the latest news. I turned off the TV, unplugged my phone, and went to bed. I laughed when Sabrina asked me to mortgage the house so she could bail out. She finally talked her parents into putting up the money, and when she got out of jail and came home, she found all the locks changed and all her stuff stacked in boxes in the driveway. "Why are you doing this to me?" she asked. "Because you're a cheater, and I don't want anything to do with you anymore." "But you don't understand. If you would just let me explain." "I got all the explanations I needed when I saw you on the news being led naked out of that motel room," and closed the door in her face. I helped her father load all her stuff into the U-Haul car, but refused to talk to him about his daughter. Sabrina called 2 or 3 times a day, but I never spoke to her, and when she showed up at my office one day, I had security escort her out of the building. It just so happened that she, Mark, and Ron had been hit with layoffs at their firm, and all 3 of them didn't fare too well when it came to their legal problems. Even though they were first-time offenders, because of the mayor's anti-drug stance, they didn't get the probation that many other first-time offenders get. They didn't help themselves by continuing to protest their innocence even when they were caught with the goods. Sabrina hurt herself badly when she demanded a blood test to prove there were no drugs in her system. The test showed that she was pure as snow, which allowed the prosecutor to argue that this was proof that the drugs found in her purse and car were for sale and not for personal use. Because the mayor wanted to show immediate results of his war on drugs, the 3 were offered a deal: 1 year in jail and 2,000 hours of community service. With good behavior, they could be out in 9 months. Their lawyer told them they'd be toast, so they agreed to the deal. While Sabrina was behind bars, I filed for divorce, as did Ron's wife and Mark's wife. All 3 did their time, and when they got out, I kept an eye on them. When the time came, I went to see Mark. I found out later that he had 3 broken ribs and an arm when he got to the emergency room of the hospital. I suppose he could have pressed charges, but I wanted to take my chances in front of a jury. A man stomping on a man who was making love to his wife would have gotten sympathy from the men on the jury anyway. Either Mark had obviously decided that was the way it was going to be, or he felt guilty about what he had done, and so left it at that. Ron and Sabrina lived together, and one evening, I caught them leaving the bar. After I finished with Ron and kicked him in the balls for the 6th time, I turned to Sabrina and said, "Not bad for a wimp, huh? Rena, remember the Christmas party where you were with Ron in that little back room? Remember how he said, 'If he's as weak as you say he is, we can make love right in front of him and get away with it'? Remember, Rena?" I saw her face change as everything fell into place, and I laughed. "That's right, Rena. That weakling has avenged your betrayal. Better call an ambulance for your boyfriend. He doesn't look so hot." She was still looking at me as I got in my car and drove away. The end.